League 6 Demonic Pacts drops on April 15th, and with it just 8 days away, we got our absolute bombshell reveal today, the Demonic Pacts. In summary, these are the new combat masteries, powerful buffs and benefits for our character to take as we progress further into the league. We'll be able to spend points on a skill tree and pick and choose which bonuses we want as we unravel further into our journeys. With 78 different pacts available to take, we're going to be drowning in choices. So today, I wanted to examine them all and give my first impressions on how I feel about them and where they currently stand in the landscape as we approach the league. Grab a snack, get some coffee, it's going to be a long one. Alright, let's go ahead and get into this. Just a couple things up top. Generally speaking, there are 4 categories that I put these packs into. There are global ones, mage, range, and melee ones. And then finally, there are 3 different tiers that we can think of the packs in. There are minor tiers, major tiers, and master tiers. We'll work our way up in order and see how they look as we progress. All right, let's start off with the regeneration relic. This is going to go straight into the solid but boring tier. What this one does is it has a 5% chance to regenerate runes, ammo, and charges. I mentioned this one first because the regeneration benefit has a ton of impacts, especially to mage and to range builds. There's going to be good synergy for this, especially later on. And this one is solid in the early game, especially to save a little bit. But once we get to the master tier, there's a much more powerful version of this one that I think is going to be really, really nice. So it's simple and easy enough, but nothing mind-blowing early on. Next, we have another very solid but boring relic. This one is simply plus 15% accuracy in all combat styles, another global relic. This one, pretty straightforward. It'll stack up nicely over the course of the league, and as we get more accuracy buffs, it'll be very nice as it stacks up. This next global one is interesting. It's got a plus 5 permanent defense level boost. I'll put this in the 1 to 2 use cases one. Objectively, defense just isn't all that strong in the regular game, let alone in a league where you're going to have absolutely everything melted by how fast you attack everything. But this one does have some synergy with some later pacts that we'll talk about. I gotta stop myself from saying relics. These pacts are going to have some buffs to the defense level, specifically thorns that we'll talk about later. But basically, the defense boost could end up rebounding damage, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we get to it. All right, next up is this little fire rune guy. Now, this is one of many regeneration-oriented pacts that we get. The one that I'll note with the fire rune is that this is the only one in the minor tier. The other 3 runes are in the major tier. So what this reads is whenever you regenerate charges from a powered staff or wand, you will also regenerate 1 fire rune. This is fine. We'll talk more about what it means to regenerate a fire rune when we get to that pact, but for right now, I'll just lump it in with 1 to 2 use cases. There's nothing objectively all that amazing about specifically fire runes, but we'll get to that in a bit. All right, next is a nice little healing buff. This one says healing with Demonic Pacts overheals you up to 30% of your base hit points level. That's pretty good, and when we're up to 99 health, we're talking about basically an additional 30 HP. That's pretty good. I would call that solid. It's kind of boring, right? Like more health, like cool. But again, you don't need health all that much in a lot of the cases of the league most of the time. But hey, maybe there are some instances where having that extra health could be useful. So it is solid, but kind of boring for right now. All right, now we got a little lightning bolt. This one has a 30% chance to regenerate runes, ammo, and charges. This one is basically a straight upgrade over the 5% chance that we have over here. So I'll put this above that. Just because it's going to launch us a lot faster to those extra buffs that we'll talk about in a minute here. We also have an extra buff to the defense boosting one. This one is now a plus 15 permanent defense level boost. Basically the same thing. It's obviously better than the plus 5, but it is something that's just going to have 1 to 2 use cases based on the synergy with later pacts. Next, we have a triple of basically the same relic, which is the 1% increase in damage style. We have 1 for magic, 1 for melee, and 1 for range, of course. These are all going to be okay, right? Like 1% just isn't all that much damage, especially early on when we're only hitting things like 10s, right? We're not going to be getting a whole lot of benefit out of this, right? It will be solid. It'll add some extra damage passively, of course, but I'm going to keep this pretty much at the bottom of the solid but boring tier, I think, for most of this tier list. Now, this one is fun. This one is the Prayer Penetration Relic. This one says all attacks have plus 15% Prayer Penetration up to 100%. So that tells me that we can have these stacked up, which could be pretty fun. And having that prayer penetration is really, really nice, especially in some regions. There's great synergy. In particular, I can think of in the desert, if you want to take Tunes of a Masket, during the phase 2 of the Warden's phase, you're forced to either range or mage them depending on which one you're on. And so if you're not spec'd into either of those combat styles, this could be really nice for you to be able to continue using your primary, even if it is a little bit reduced damage, you're still able to use the style that you've put the most amount of your work into. I'm going to cover these next 4 together. These are the ones that effectively make it so that ancient magics also have elemental weaknesses paired with them. So now smoke spells count as air spells, ice spells count as water spells, blood spells count as fire spells, and shadow spells count as earth spells. Now, this could be really interesting because there seems to be a lot of attention given to elemental weaknesses, especially in these later pacts. To give an idea, they're going to add the Devil's Element from the Ectothermy boss. This gives you an extra boost to your elemental weaknesses, and tons of bosses in the game now have elemental weaknesses to them. Olm has a 50% earth weakness, Verzik has a 50% fire weakness, and the Wardens, I believe, also have a 50% earth weakness. So there actually is some pretty good uses for the elemental weaknesses at raid bosses even, and across most PVM in general. To get a full idea, I would definitely check out the elemental weaknesses page on the wiki. It might give you a good idea if there are monsters in the regions that you plan on taking that have good synergy with elemental weaknesses. But overall, yeah, I think it's cool to have Ancient Spellbook have that effect. I just think it adds more variety. Cool option. So that'll do it for the minor pacts. Now we can go on to the major ones, which there are a ton of. To give an idea, there are 15 total minor pacts that we talked about, and I believe there are upwards of 40 major ones. So let's go ahead and get on into them. The first one is the magic one. This one is that whenever your combat spells or generate runes, your magic level is boosted by 1 for 30 ticks. Or for 18 seconds. The boost cannot go above 10 magic levels, and any additional triggers will reset this duration. So this is interesting because your magic level could fluctuate a lot, but it can also be just up at 10. If you're able to consecutively regenerate your runes constantly, if you have the Master Pact, which is going to give you a 50% chance to regenerate. We'll talk more about that later, but this is a pretty good way to actually replace an imbued heart, I think. And it's not going to make it as necessary for majors, which I think is a really important thing in the league. Even in the league, much like the main game, the imbued heart is a huge pain to get. And even with Culling Spree offering a really nice passive, it's still possible to get unlucky. It's still possible for you to not get your imbued heart in the time of the league. So I think this is a solid one. I think it's kind of boring just because it's a boost, but I think it is still really good. So I'll put it at the top of the solid but boring tier for now. This next one is a little ranged echo effect. It reads that whenever you regenerate ammo, you have a 25% chance to fire a ranged echo against the enemy. Now, if I'm reading this correctly, your ranged echo will roll at your max damage. So basically, you have a 25% chance to hit your enemy twice whenever you regenerate your ammo. Again, if you have the Master Pact, you're going to have a 50% chance to regenerate. So keep that in mind whenever we talk about these echo effects. I basically think about it as this has a 12.5% chance to proc whenever you fire any ranged attack. Now, I do think that is really, really good. I think that is going to be a fun or effective idea, pretty high up there as well. Not quite cracked, but it's getting there. Mostly because think about how this is going to work with really hard-hitting weapons. Crossbows in particular are looking really interesting in this league with a lot of the packs that we'll talk more about later, or even with a twisted bow, you could have a chance just to hit twice, which could be pretty incredible. Up next, we have our first melee relic in the major tier. This one reads that your minimum hit when attacking with a melee weapon is increased by 3. This minimum hit is further increased by 3 for each additional tile between you and the target. So there is some pretty interesting synergy with two-handed weapons, specifically with halberds this league. It looks like you can get up to 7 tiles away from an enemy with a halberd, which is absolutely hilarious just to mentally think about. But even with a scythe, you'll be able to get around 3 tiles away from somebody. So the minimum hits, they definitely add up. I do think this is solid but boring. It is really good though, and it adds a lot of passive damage between you and your target. I'm not totally sure about the tile ranges on the scythe. Somebody can double check me on that in the comment section, give us some more accuracy on that, but this is still a very solid way to add some passive damage, and I think it's a really solid choice. All right, so next we get into the magic effects of regeneration. We have one for each type of rune here. Let's just go ahead and go over them in order. For the air runes, we're going to have the chance to restore 1 prayer point per rune regenerated, that's fine, right? Like, I think that this isn't going to be too powerful. I'll put this in the 1 to 2 use cases one. I don't think it's going to be all that useful to keep your pair up. Although it's worth noting, this could be helpful a little bit with AFK if you want to have your protection pairs up and just walk away. It could be nice for Slayer tasks or combat training, things like that in general, just to keep your pair up. It could be something useful there, but I'm not that excited about this one. For the water one, the effect is that you can heal up 1 HP per rune regenerated every time. And again, a reminder, 50% chance at the Master Pact level. So again, we want to think about these as having basically a 50% chance to happen once we get to that tier. I kind of went back and forth on where to put this one. I'm going to put it in 1 to 2 cases, mostly because of the Ice Barrage benefit. Remember, if we use ice spells, that will count as water spells in this scenario, and per rune that we get back, we can get back a few health. So I think that there will be some areas this will be nice, especially to AFK, and we'll be able to overheal with the previous effect from the Pact. So we'll have a good amount of synergy, but I'm just not too sure where we're going to use that. I just don't think health is all that important, and I'm not sure where it's going to be good. For the fire runes, we're going to have the increased damage of our next spell hit every time that we regenerate 1 rune. That is decent, at least. It's going to only go up by 1, of course, each time, but that could add up pretty fast. That is decently solid. Again, damage is damage, right? So I'll put this at the end of the solid but boring tier, just because it does add up eventually, even if it isn't all that overwhelming. Okay, I've gone kind of back and forth on this one. This is the Earth Pact. This is going to be that whenever your combat spells regenerate Earth runes, your defense level is boosted by 1 per rune regenerated for 30 ticks or for 18 seconds. This one has a pretty similar effect to the defense boosting ones from earlier, which is going to synergize nicely with the Thorns Pact. Objectively, again, defense isn't all that good, but if you're going to be taking that Thorns option, this could add up really nicely, and there can be some really, really nice benefits to it. So I'll put it in 1 to 2 use cases, but I do like this one quite a lot, actually. I think it is a pretty unique and nice benefit. Speaking of which, we're finally there. Let's talk about the Thorns Pact. While you have a shield equipped, you gain the Thorns effect, which says that whenever you are attacked by an enemy, it will be instantly hit for 3 melee damage. This effect can only trigger once per hit splat and will trigger if you take 0 damage. And of course, there are other pacts that will specify that they affect Thorns. And what I'm talking about with these defense boosting ones is that there is a pact later, which will increase the amount of damage that your Thorns give, which will synergize very nicely with these defense boosting ones. So I'm going to put this in the fun or effective tier. I think Thorns is really cool, and there's going to be a lot of very, very nice and fun benefits that comes along with it. There are some further boosts to Thorns, which we'll talk more about later, that I think make it really powerful, but objectively, I think Thorns is really fun. I think it's going to be a really nice option, and it'll stack up damage really nicely. Up next, we have another melee pact. This one reads that weapons under 1 kilogram always trigger an additional melee hit using 40% of your base max hit. This is pretty amazing. I'm going to put this at the top of the fun or the effective tier. The only real weapon this impacts is the Abyssal Whip and also the Abyssal Dagger. Now, it is worth mentioning that Dragon Claws were the other high tier weapon that I saw under 1 kilogram, but of course this pact mentioned that this does not trigger on special attacks, unfortunately, so it's basically going to be the Abyssal Whip or the Abyssal Dagger that we're going to have this effect proccing from. Now, melee doesn't have all that much of a chance to get echo hits off on it, but this is going to be kind of a bit of a substitute for it, especially for these lighter one-handed weapons. This is going to be a lot of fun damage. I think that it could definitely make a whip throughout the entire league very viable, and it pairs really nicely with Kandarin if you choose to take that, because you can get that upgraded to a tentacle whip, which can be a very nice way to get some good damage off. Next, we have another relic that I think is really fun. This is going right at the top of the fun tier. This is called Blindbag. This reads that each melee attack with a heavy melee weapon, which is greater than 1 kilogram, which, as we found out, is most melee weapons, it has a chance to instantly trigger a Blindbag attack, which is basically an automatic attack to your current target with a random heavy melee weapon in your inventory as if you have it equipped. This will ignore all stat requirements and attack delay. The attack can trigger additional Blindbag attacks, but cannot be triggered from special attacks. So I just think this is a lot of fun. I think there's some really cool and unique pairings that you can get with this one. If you're looking for strictly the best damage that you can get from heavy weapons, the Elder Maul offers the highest strength bonus. You could have all of the God Swords in your inventory if you took Asgarnia as a good option, or even the Darok Great Axe from Mauritania could be a fun option, just to randomly bust that out and hit people with. Now, unfortunately, we don't know the percentage chance it has to trigger the attack, but there are some really fun add-ons to the Blindbag, which we'll talk a bit more about later. I just love this effect. I think it's really fun and creative. I think it's a really cool one. Up next, we have one which reads that melee range is doubled while using a two-handed weapon. I wouldn't call this one boring, but I am going to put it in the solid but boring tier regardless, just because it doesn't impact a lot of weapons objectively at this stage outside of Halberds, but we'll talk a bit more about those very soon. So now we're going to talk about a few of the range echo packs that we have. The first one has to do with bows. Now, I'll first mention that unless my math is off, I think it's going to be about a 30% chance at max to proc a ranged echo with a bow. So this one reads that while a bow is equipped, your ranged echoes will never miss. So effectively 30% of the time, that bonus hit that you do, which again does deal full damage, is never ever going to miss. That is very solid. That is very strong in terms of the damage that it's going to have. I do think it's a little bit boring. It is just flat damage at the end of the day, but that is going to be very, very good. You can imagine a twisted bow sometimes will just hit twice and it will never miss that second hit whenever that 30% chance does actually proc. I think that's going to be incredibly strong. Next, we have a similar option for the crossbow version. This one is very interesting. While a crossbow is equipped, you have a 15% chance to trigger ranged echoes. Now, I think that's absolutely incredible. I'm putting this in the cracked tier. I just think that is a super fun option. I personally love using crossbows in the game. I think that is a really, really fun option. The Zerat crossbow is looking like a really interesting ranged weapon this league. So consider taking Asgarnia if you're a ranger. It could be a lot of fun. And most importantly, this is going to be a 45% chance that you can have your echo proc actually, which is unbelievable. Basically half the time you're going to be hitting this extra echo hit with the crossbow. But even if you don't want to take Asgarnia, it seems like heavy ballista is also going to count as a crossbow. So that can also be a way that you can take advantage of this pact, which I think is going to be a lot of fun to use. And then to round out the ranged echo effects, this one reads that while a thrown weapon is equipped, ranged echoes have a 20% chance to max hit, which could be very interesting, especially with very fast attacking weapons like blowpipes, darts, knives, things like that. They might not have a very high max hit, but they're basically going to have a 50% chance to hit twice every single time. So potentially every 2 ticks or every 1 tick, that could be absolutely amazing. I think this is going to be a lot of fun right at the top of the fun or the effective tier. I don't think it's quite as cracked as a crossbow option as personally, just because crossbows hit so damn hard. But I do think this could be a lot of fun and you'll hit crazy hit splats with the thrown options. Next, we have another very solid but boring one. This one very simply reads it as plus 35% accuracy in all combat styles, which is fantastic. It's great, right? 35% accuracy is going to go a really long way, especially for more rapid attacking weapons. So solid but boring, enough said. Next up, we have the other 3 runes and the regeneration effects that they get. We already talked about the fire one a little bit earlier, but the water one now, this one mentions that whenever you regenerate charges from a powered staff or a wand, you will also regenerate 1 water rune. As a reminder, the regeneration effect for water is that it will basically heal you, which again, that's fine. I'll put it in the 1 to 2 use cases. I'm not crazy about the healing like I've talked about, so I'll just leave that there and move on. And then I'll just put the air and the earth ones inside of the 1 to 2 use cases as well. A reminder that the air effect will increase your prayer and the earth effect will increase your defense. Now, one thing I wanted to mention while I'm talking about these rune effects is that this is going to be impacted based on the number of runes that you save. So for example, Fire Surge is going to cost 10 fire runes and 7 air runes. So you're going to get the effect of both the fire and the air runes if you get the regeneration effect whenever you cast that spell, for example. All right, this next one is going to be fun. Attack rate with combat spells in a spellbook is sped up by a certain number of ticks. So that is the standard spellbook, the Arceus spellbook, or the ancient spellbook, or the lunar spellbook, I guess, too, but not a lot of attacks on that one. This is the hallmark of leagues, right? 2-tick attack speed. If you have ever played a league before, you know that is a defining characteristic of what a league is. This is cracked. There's no other way to put it. Having a 2-tick wand is gonna be what leagues is all about. You have to put it up there if it's gonna increase your attack speed up to that level. Now, in that same spirit, this next relic is also amazing. The attack rate with powered staves is going to be sped up by 3 ticks. All one-handed powered staves have their max hit reduced by 8, and you cannot have your attack speed reduced below 1 tick, of course. Now, like I just said, if it speeds up your attacks, it's going into S tier. Note that this will only impact one-handed stabs by reducing their max hit by 8. To me, it is very obvious why they chose to do this. The Eye of Iak is going to be a 1-tick attack weapon, along with the Trident is also going to be that. Those 2 weapons are going to be crazy at 1-tick attack speed. I played the Grid Master, and if you played that, you might know that the Eye of Iak was 1 tick in that game mode, and it was absolutely unbelievable and a ton of fun to use. So a 1-tick staff is crazy. Note that you're not going to have to deal with your max hit getting reduced by 8 with the Shadow, because that is, of course, a 2-handed powered staff. So no impact really to the Shadow. It will be just as strong as previous leagues. but I really like that they're doing more for the other forms of magic attack, just so it can be more balanced and you don't have to feel terrible if you want to go magic, but you don't want to take a mega rare region. This next one is kind of thorn-ish. It's kind of equivalent to that idea. This one reads that if you have a shield equipped, you have a 0.1% chance per defense level to reflect all damage back to your attacker. So of course, we have 2 relics that can increase your defense level by about 15, and that's going to get you up to 114 defense in total once you get up to that endgame level. So that would mean that you have 114 defense, which means it's a little over a 10% chance to deflect all damage back to your attacker. So this could be a lot of fun with like a vengeance tank kind of a build. It can be really cool with a high defense build. It's cool, right? And I think that it is going to be something that is a little bit fun for sure. But I'm going to put this in the 1 to 2 use cases one. I just don't think it's going to be as impactful as you might think it's going to be. But hey, I do think it's really cool, and it is a very fun pack that they came up with. This next one is also for melee and is also kind of funny. It reads that attacking with a melee weapon or with thorns has a 10% chance to heal you based off your distance between you and your target. So that is 1 tile is equal to 1 health. Again, with a halberd, you can get up to 7 tiles away with somebody once you're maxed out in that. So that means that you would have a 10% chance to heal back basically 7 HP every time that you would attack with your halberd. Again, that's fine. I kind of feel it similarly with like the water effect with healing. It's just not going to be all that impactful in my mind anyways. And it's not going to be proccing all that frequently either. I think there's a couple of use cases it'll be good, but I don't think it's all that good, honestly. In fact, just because it's empty right now, this is going to go into the dog water tier. I just think healing's not that useful, frankly. All right, the next one is pretty fun as well. This one reads that whenever you attack an enemy from at least 2 tiles away with any style, you restore 2% special attack energy. Now, if I'm reading this correctly, I think what it's trying to say is that for each individual enemy that we attack, we're going to get 2% special attack, which is going to be really nice when doing Slayer, for example, in particular. This is pretty solid. I'm going to put it in solid but boring, only because it is just a 2% increase each time, and it's going to be per enemy. So at bosses, for example, it's not going to be all that impactful for sure, but there is a version of this that is in the Master here that I think is much more compelling. I realized I accidentally didn't record this last one, so I'll just go ahead and redo it really quickly. This one reads that melee weapons that are under 1 kilogram or one-handed increases your melee strength by 20% of your strength level. Now, if you didn't know, a prayer like Piety already increases your strength level along with potions, for example. So I'm wondering if it will compound if you use that kind of a prayer. But the other part that this mentions is that it's for all one-handed weapons or for a two-handed weapon that's under 1 kilogram. Now, based on just reading the wiki, the only real two-handed weapon under 1 kilogram that this would impact that seems useful are Dragon Claws, which is really interesting. It could really supercharge the special attacking effect of that weapon, basically giving it an extra 20% strength damage, which is unbelievable. So this is really, really cool. I'm going to put this near the top of the fun or the effective tier. It's going to make those one-handed weapons like the whip or the Blade of Saldor even more viable, especially if you don't want to have to take a mega rare raid region and hunt for a sights the whole time. I understand not everybody wants to do that. So this could be a really cool option to make those weapons even more powerful and not feel like you need to go for a scythe. This next one's another fun one for melee. It reads that melee strength is increased by 50% of your worn prayer bonus. So effectively, each individual item has its prayer bonus, of course, and you can cut that in half and it'll add it on as melee strength bonus. So a good example I thought of was a Sunlight Body. That's going to have a plus 10 prayer bonus, which means it would give you a plus 5 melee strength bonus, which actually makes it better than a Bandos Plate Body, for example. So this is really solid. I think it could be really fun. It also stacks up really nicely with the Crystal Armor, because with the Crystal Blessing, you're going to get the bonus effect back onto melee weapons, not just range weapons. And Crystal Armor also has a prayer bonus, which means you're going to get that extra juice off of it just based off of this one pact. So pretty solid, pairs up really nicely with Tyranwin. If you're planning on going that route for melee, it could be a really nice way to compound even more damage. Not to mention that you'll get all the bonus from your other gear. So things like an Amulet of Fury has nice prayer bonus, your blessing slot, right? Even a shield if it has a good bonus on prayer. All these things could add up and it'll just make you hit even harder. All right, so this next one is kind of weird, but stay with me here. It reads that attacks with melee weapons can consume 5 overhealed hit points if available, increasing your minimum hit on that attack by 5. So basically, you'll need to be above 100 health to take advantage of this. And anytime that you are over that, you're going to have to spend 5 of your health to get an increased hit by 5. I think that's okay, right? Like I think it's fine, right? I don't know how frequently you're actually going to be above 100 health in the melee build, especially. So I'm just going to leave this in the 1 to 2 use cases one. Damage is damage for sure, but I actually don't know how frequently you're actually going to be able to take advantage of this one. Now, if I'm wrong and you're able to constantly get extra 5 on every single attack, that's really, really good, and it would put it up 1 tier. But as of right now, I'm not that crazy about it. I could be wrong for sure, but for now, I'm going to put it in the 1 to 2 use cases. This next one is technically a melee pact, but it has nice synergy with ranged builds. When hitting a target with a two-handed melee weapon, you have a 5% chance to trigger a ranged echo as if you have a crossbow, a bow, and a thrown weapon equipped. Now, I have a lot of questions about this one for sure. What tier of crossbow, bow, or thrown weapon would it consider it to be? How high is the damage going to hit? It's only a 5% chance. Does this get impacted by the crossbow effect, for example? If I have that additional 15% chance to proc it, I don't know. I'm left with a lot of questions about this one for sure. I'm going to tentatively put it in the solid tier. I'm just not too sure if that's actually where it's going to belong long term. But a chance to have an 1 in 20 to hit some pretty high damage. It's cool, and I think there's some interesting potential with this one. So I'll put it in the solid tier for now, but I definitely think it could fall into the 1 to 2 use case tier if it's not that good. All right, adjusted my screen again. We will chug along and talk about this next one, which reads that you have a 5% chance per attack in any style to roll max accuracy. This is increased by 5% for each tile distance between you and your target. This could be really, really good. It's going to go straight into the fun or the effective tier, mostly because already with melee, you have a really far amount of tile range that you can attack people with. But with mage and with range, you can be up to 10 tiles away from your opponent, which means you could have a 50% chance to roll with max accuracy. So that could be really, really strong. Basically means that you might never, ever miss. It could be pretty high up there or equivalent to that. So I think that's going to be a very powerful pact. This next one goes out to all the non-mega rare users. This one reads, while an offhand item is equipped, basically your shield slot, you will gain +5 melee strength, +5 range strength, and +2% magic damage. Those boosts are very, very good. It's nice to just get those passively for sure. But at the same time, if you are going for a mega rare route, I don't know if they're going to get all that much benefit out of this one, of course. Sure, it'll be situational with things like special attacks that are one-handed still, but I think that for the most part, it's not going to have a ton of uses. Sure, there's good use cases for it, no doubt, but overall, you don't need to take this one, especially if you're going for a mega rare route, so I'll put it in the 1 to 2 use cases, but objectively, if you're not taking a mega rare, this is a very solid relic for sure. So strong case for it to be in the solid tier, but for me personally, I'll put it in the 1 to 2 use cases only because it's really only going to shine if you're not taking a mega rare. This next one is kind of funny. It says whenever you max hit from at least 3 tiles away, your next hit from a different style deals 25% damage. So that is obviously a very powerful tool. The problem is you got to be really on top of your stuff to take advantage of this, right? You got to be on the lookout for when your max hits occur. And when you have sped up attack speed, that can be really easy to miss out on your opportunity. So this is definitely a really cool one. I think it is very fun to use, actually a very high skill ceiling on this one. So I will put it on the fun and effective side, but I think it's going to be really hard to use. And frankly, if you're more of a lazy player like me, for example, I don't think I would take this one only because I think it's way too hard for me to use and I don't want to have to pay that much attention. But objectively, very powerful pact. Okay, so this next one I read and my initial thought was this is freaking cracked, but then I thought about it a little more and now I'm going to put it in the fun or the effective tier. So this one reads that air spells deal +7% damage for each active prayer. Now, that is really strong, and you can have up to 6 active prayers on at once. If you take Zaya or the Grimoire, you'll need to get the Preserve prayer to be able to get the max out of this one. But the big thing is that there aren't that many bosses that have a good air weakness to them that can really take advantage of using the air spells. So if you're going to be using a standard spellbook, yes, you can get upwards of 40% extra damage if you have all 6 prayers up. The problem is that the elemental weakness from other types of spells is probably going to be upwards of 50% sometimes, especially if you have the Devil's Element along with that. So it is really good, and it's going to be a nice way to attack with the standard spellbook. If you don't have a powered staff yet, and you're not attacking something that has an elemental weakness, it is still going to be really good for those scenarios. But I did think it was going to be a lot stronger until I looked into it. So it is still very fun, but still very effective, but not as good as I originally thought it was going to be. This next one is pretty nice. It's going to be the water spells deal increased damage the higher health percentage you have, so plus 20% damage at 100% health. I know I've been trashing on healing effects a lot, but this objectively is quite strong. It's going to have that extra damage effect, and it does stack quite nicely with these use cases, hence why they're in the 1 to 2 use case tier, but objectively, I still don't think that they're all that strong. But that extra damage that you get from having that high health and basically always being at high health with the water effects is going to be pretty nice. So whenever you're using your ice spells or your water spells, you're going to have this effect of basically plus 20% damage absolutely everywhere. So for this next one, I'll admit I'm not entirely sure if I'm reading this right, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but this one reads that fire spells cast burn up to 6% of your maximum hit points to increase your damage dealt by double the amount burned for. This effect cannot kill you directly. So my understanding is that it will take 6% of your maximum health, so let's call it 99 HP, which would mean that you're going to get about 6 damage back. It could be 5, but I'm rounding up. So for now, let's call it 6 damage. So you double that, and that would mean that you would deal 12 damage every time to your opponent, but you would take 6 damage every time that you attack with the fire spell. I think that's how this works. I could be wrong about that again. If that is the case, I do think that's quite strong, and it could be a lot of fun to use. It could be kind of annoying to have your health chip down and have to heal back up, but at the same time, if you're up against something where you don't care about taking constant damage, and you're just praying and negating all the effects anyways, this is going to be insanely powerful, especially against things that have fire elemental weaknesses. Oh my god, you could absolutely be melting through things, and this could be a lot of fun. You max out the devil's element and everything else, you could be having an absolute blast. Now, finally, we have the Earth Spells one. This one says that the hits will reduce the enemy's defense and magic defense levels by 2 each time that you attack. That, to me, is really, really strong. I want to put it in cracked, but I actually don't know if it is, like, truly cracked. To be safe, I'm going to put it in the fun or the effective tier for now. I think that's just a more safe option, but I am really intrigued by this one. Frankly, the only reason I'm not putting it in cracked is because I just think that you'll kill things so quickly. It's not going to matter that the defense is reduced so much. But I still do think it could be quite powerful, especially in long fights. If you're in like a mega scaled up Chambers of Xeric, for example, this could be a really nice way to get the hand down, and it could make your time a lot easier, especially because it'll pair nicely with the elemental weakness that Ulm has. Next, we have a prayer pact, which reads that while protection prayers are not active, you restore 1 prayer point every 15 ticks or 9 seconds, and this is sped up by 1 tick for every 7 worn prayer bonus you have. I think most players will have no problem getting up to 14 prayer bonus around the mid game, and then towards the end game, a lot of us will have over 21 prayer bonus. So between 12 or 13 ticks, you'll get 1 prayer point back. Honestly, I'm a little underwhelmed by this one. I don't think that's all that useful. I think in most content, you're going to have your protection prayers up anyways. There's maybe 1 to 2 use cases for it for sure that I'm not thinking of, but I'm going to put this in the dog water tier. I just don't know where it's going to be all that useful. And hey, the dog water tier is looking a little bit sparse. I got to be a bit harsh on these ones, you know? Okay, so this next one required a little bit of research, but I crunched some of the numbers, and I think this has potential to be really, really fun. So this next one basically reads that all recoil and thorns effects deal additional damage equal to 1% of your total defense bonus. So immediately, I'm going to put this in the fun and effective tier right at the top because I think that there's a lot of cool potential with this one. Let me break it down for you guys. So let's imagine a build that has basically max defense. It's pretty attainable if you take Moritania and Kandarin, and this will give you maximum amount of recoil damage as well as a very high defense bonus. Now, if I'm reading this correctly and it's your total defense bonuses, that would mean that you would add every defense bonus, your melee, your mage, your range, all of those combined would be the total number that we get. So with that, with this primarily defensive build, we'd have a total number of 1,794 boosts to our defensive stats. So that would mean that we would deal back 17 damage just from the defensive buffs. Thorns itself gives you plus 3 damage every single time. So it's a guaranteed 20 damage back on every single attack, even if your opponent hits a 0. Now, let's not forget, this stacks with our Ring of Suffering and our Echo Boots, which means that if we do take damage from those effects, those will also individually deal off 1% of our total defense bonus, which is another 17 damage every time the Echo Boots or the Ring of Suffering procs. So if you're taking damage, if my math is correct, you could deal about 54 damage every single time as rebound damage, not including your own attacks that you would be dealing with yourself. So let me know if I'm off base with those numbers. That is currently how I read it. In fact, after talking about it, I'm going to put this in the cracked tier. That is absolutely unbelievable. And I think there's a lot of very fun tank builds that Meleeers could take advantage of if they want to go that direction. And the numbers that I crunched, if you get Mauritania for the Justy and then Kandarin from the Ring of Suffering, you can free yourself up to take almost any third region to pair with those. If you want a good option, Fremennik could give you the Battle Hat. If you want even more defensive bonuses, that could benefit you as well. All right, more to get through, so let's hop along to the next melee buff, which is going to be that melee weapons under 1 kilogram attack 1 tick faster. Again, this is primarily going to be for the whip, or if we want to get the Dragon Claws or the Burning Claws, if those are somehow available, all of those would qualify underneath the 1 kilogram tier. I guess also the Abyssal Dagger would fall underneath that as well. This is really good. It's going to be very strong. It is definitely in the fun and effective tier for me. Very powerful. Now, the next one is going to be yet another blind bag effect. We're not going to know the perfect math on this one because we don't know the percentage chance that blind bag has to proc, but this one reads that for each unique heavy melee weapon, which is greater than 1 kilogram in your inventory, your chance of a blind bag trigger is increased by 2% up to a maximum of 10% from 5 different weapons. So especially if you have a bunch of very strong, powerful, heavy weapons, ideas that come to mind are like the God Swords, for example. If you take Asgarnia, this is going to be a really fun way to get that extra damage boost. So I also think this is a very fun and effective relic. I'm going to put this inside of the fun and effective tier as a result. I think as a blind bag strategy is going to be a lot of fun for people with the proper regions. Now, this does mention that it's different unique weapons in particular, so if you think about it, there are 3 unique ways you could get a scythe if you have Mauritania. You could have the holy version, the blood version, and the regular version, or hell, even an uncharged version, and you could have up to 4 scythes in your inventory. Granted, you'd probably be using one of those, but still, there's some pretty interesting potential with blind bag, I think. This next one seems really strong for Halberds in particular. Your maximum hit when attacking with the melee weapon is increased by 4% and an additional 4% for every 3 tiles of distance between you and your target. So normally you can get a 2 tile distance, it seems like, with most weapons, but with Halberds you'll be able to get up to 7 tiles away with most weapons. So that would mean that you're going to get an extra 12% damage increase with your Halberd. Now, one thing that's worth mentioning with this is that I'm not sure how this reads in terms of the increase of the max hit. Does that mean that just strictly your max hit is going to go up by 12? That's what I would assume at this case. Not necessarily that every single one of your hits is going to increase as a 12% damage increase. So I'm going to assume this just impacts the max hit, which means that it's not quite cracked in my opinion, but it is still quite good. It's going to go into the fun and the effective tier again, and that's going to be sitting nicely there, I think. Okay, I'm going to hide the dog water tier because this is getting a little out of hand. It's starting to get a little bit blurry, which I apologize for, but let's keep on chugging along. Next up, we have this relic, which reads that whenever an attack deals 0 damage to you while either a 2-handed shield or an offhand is equipped, you're healed for 2 and restore 2 prayer points as well. So my initial thought with this is that this is insane for the AFK. If you're using a goading potion or you're just AFKing your Slayer, things like that, you're basically never ever going to run out of prayer and protection, which is going to be amazing. Now, you are limited because you do need to be wearing a shield. So in scenarios where you want to use your scythe, you won't get this benefit. But if you're a melee build in particular, this could be really, really nice. And it's going to slot very nicely in the fun and effective tier, a very strong option. Okay, this next one is unbelievable. This is straight up a 30% damage boost to your ranged prayers. This is going into cracked tier. I don't care. I mean, it's going to increase your impact of rigor just by so much. Rigor is already crazy. It's like almost a 25 to 30% range strength increase as is. And then on top of that, we're making it 30% more effective. This is basically having like a Slayer helmet on top of everything everywhere. Like this is going to add a crazy amount of damage on top of it. I think if you're a ranged build and you take rigor, or you have the Grimoire relic to get access to it if you don't have Zaya, this is going to be pretty much a must take to maximize that prayer. It's going to be unbelievable for a ranged build. We are so close to being done with the major tier. Next up, we have the ranged relic, which says that whenever you regenerate ammo, you have a plus 5% chance to fire a ranged echo against the enemy. So remember, your echo attacks will deal full damage and you have another plus 5% increased chance. This will round you out to a 50% chance for your crossbows to have an echo hit. I believe a 55% chance for your thrown weapons. And then I think it's a 40 or 45% chance with your bows. So a very strong, powerful tool that you can get whenever you regenerate your ammo. This will go also into the fun and effective tier. Actually, honestly, this is more in the solid tier. I don't think it's as fun necessarily, but damage is good. Next up, we have a strong ranged relic. This one reads that your range strength is increased by 1 for every 10 hit points difference between your current hit points and your hit points level. So if you had 99 health and you were down at 9 HP instead, you would have an effective +9 range strength bonus to your kit. This next one has the potential to be absolutely unbelievable. This one reads that ranged echoes can now trigger additional ranged echoes at half your chance to trigger them up to 4 times. So in simple terms, if I'm understanding this properly, you can get up to 6 attacks off with a singular ranged hit if you get lucky enough to land every single echo. If you have a crossbow, for example, you would have about 50% chance, 45% chance to get your proc off in the first place. So basically, if you win 6 coin flips in a row, you could hit upwards of 600 damage in a single crossbow attack, which is freaking crazy to think about if you get crazy lucky. Now, obviously, that won't be the case every time, but with your ranged build, this is going to add your damage up drastically very, very quickly. This is also going to go into the cracked tier, in my opinion. This is just going to be unbelievable for your damage output. Only 3 remain in the major tier. We have our next one for rangers as well. This one is for bows. They will attack 1 tick faster or 0.6 seconds faster. You know that we love having the increased attack speed, but it doesn't seem like you're going to be able to get to a 2-tick T-bow, unfortunately, not with this relic anyways. So I'm going to put this in the fun and effective tier. It is a very, very effective thing to increase your attack speed, but if we're not going to be getting to 2 ticks, it might not be seen as good as it usually is. So this next one, I'm sure people who are smarter than me can come up with some really cool uses for this one. It reads that while a thrown weapon is equipped, range strength is also increased by 80% of your melee strength. So in the scenario where you have a Drygore blowpipe, for example, where you might not need to worry too much about your accuracy, you could max out your melee strength and have a really nice way to deal a whole lot of damage and compound it with your range strength as well. So I think there's a lot of potential with this one. I'll be honest, beyond the Drygore blowpipe, I'm not sure where else this is going to be useful, but it does seem like it could be fun and it can be a nice way to mix up your strategy and have a little hybrid effect going. All right, this next one is interesting. It reads simply that crossbows attack 2 ticks slower, but they deal plus 70% damage. Now, this one will have an obvious trade-off to it. The echo attacks will be less frequent with the crossbow, so unfortunately you won't get them off as much as you might want to, but 70% damage is pretty hard to ignore, especially if you have a lot of accuracy boosts and you're able to hit really consistently. This could be extremely good, and you might not really care all that much about the echo effects. On top of that, you can still get the echo damage, you just won't get as many rolls simply because you're not attacking as quickly as possible. Now, I might be wrong about this. My instinct is to put this in the cracked tier, only because holy shit does it sound like a lot of fun. I cannot wait to see what the max hit is that somebody's going to get with a ballista or with a Zerite crossbow or something. It's going to be absolutely hilarious. Okay, we have done it. We have finally made it to the master tier of Demonic Pacts. I have been sitting here for so long. I've been yapping my mouth off, but we only have 15 more to get through, so let's run through them and talk about what we got. First up, we have the Regenerate Master Pact. This one reads very simply that you have a 50% chance now to regenerate runes, ammo, and charges. It reads that whenever you use runes to cast a spell, fire ammunition from a ranged weapon, or consume charges with a charged weapon, there's a % chance to generate an additional resource spent. So my understanding is this could boost up the amount of impacts that the other regenerate relics have. So for example, if we're dealing extra damage with our fire spells, for example, if we get the regeneration off, this would mean that we would use an extra rune for that fire spell, but we'd also get the extra effect compounded, if I'm reading this correctly anyways. This is going to be really good. It's straight into the fun and the effective tier. It's going to stack up very nicely with the previous relics. Let's talk about all the magic ones next, starting with the air spells. Air spells have a 1% chance to max hit for every 1 prayer bonus. This chance is doubled against enemies weak to air spells. This sounds like a lot of fun. I think that there is going to be some cool hybrid stuff. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a lot of magic gear that has really strong prayer bonus, but it is going to passively be there. It's going to be pretty strong, I think. It'll add up nicely. Definitely going to be nice for the elemental focused builds with the Devil's Element at places with those elemental weaknesses. It's for sure going to be good. I'm actually going to knock us down a little bit, talking myself into it. It's more of the solid but boring tier, in my opinion. It's just going to be more situational in my mind than we probably expect. Next up in the master tier, we have the water spells. This will mean that they will bounce back to you and heal you for 60% of the damage dealt to your target. Now, 60% is absolutely massive. It could mean that you're not going to have to worry about even praying at some places, and you could keep your damage low with all the water benefits and healing that you get. But like I've been talking about, I don't know if healing is all that useful in a lot of places. I will put it in the solid tier, but it does feel kind of boring to me, but it could be really, really nice if you need to keep your HP up. I can't think of where you would want that, but I'm sure there will be some very good cases for it. All right, the next one seems interesting. This is the fire one, which reads that fire spell hits apply 1 burn or a maximum of 5 and will bounce up to 2 nearby targets. So if we remember, I believe that the burn will have up to 12 damage that it can deal at the cost of potentially 6 of your health, or it could be 10 if it rounds down. We're still not sure yet, but this would basically mean that we can be dealing constant damage to up to multiple targets through burns, and I think it could add up really, really fast, especially in spots with a lot of enemies to fight at once. So I'm going to put this in the fun and the effective tier. I can imagine that some people will come up with really cool cases for this one. I can't think of many off the top of my head, but it does sound very strong, and I'm sure it will be a lot of fun. And for the final magic one, the Earth benefit, it reads that Earth spells deal additional flat damage based on your current defense level plus 1 damage per their number of defense levels. Now, I've read in the discords that apparently this is incorrect information right now. It's supposed to be a percentage of your defense level, but we actually don't know what that percentage is. So for right now, I'm sure it's going to be good. I'm sure it's going to be fun and it's going to be effective. So I'm going to put that in that tier for now. All right, we're going to hide the 1 to 2 use case tier just so this can look a little bit neater. Next up, we have another Thorns relic in the master tier. This one reads, when the Thorn effect triggers, it will always hit twice, dealing 50% of its damage in the second hit. I mean, we already talked about how crazy the Thorns Relic could be if you go with a defensive-oriented build. I'm going to put this in the cracked tier only because if you go with that build, this could make you just unstoppable potentially, and you could just be shredding through everything in the game. So I think the Thorns build could be very fun, a very compelling build for sure, and I'm excited to see what happens when somebody builds it. Next up, we have another melee-focused special attacking relic. This one reads, whenever you deal damage with a melee weapon, you restore 2% special attack energy per hit. Now, that's cracked, in my opinion. That's going to be absolutely crazy for every single attack that you deal, potentially at a 2-tick speed. You could be getting back your special attack energy extremely quickly with a relic like this. On top of that, if you take the Flask of Fervor, you'll be able to regenerate your special attack immediately just by clicking it. It'll have a 3-minute cooldown, but for every damage that you deal, you're actually going to reduce that cooldown on top of that. So you could just be spitting out special attacks, especially if you take this one. This could be really, really strong. We now have the final Blindbag relic that we can talk about. For each unique heavy melee weapon in your inventory, the max hit of your Blindbag attack is increased by a percentage up to a maximum of 10% if you have 5 weapons in your inventory. So not only could you get the damage from your God Sword or your Scythe or your Elder Maul, whatever you have, it's also going to increase an additional damage of 10% just by activating. So that's going to be really, really good. I don't think it's quite as cracked as the other ones in this tier. I'm going to put it in the fun and the effective option, but I do think that, again, Blindbag will be a ton of fun, even if it's strictly not going to be a crazy amount of DPS. We have our final melee-oriented pact. This one is the Halberd pact, basically. If your melee attack range is at least 4, it is now increased to 7, which means that for Halberds, you're going to have that major benefit. On top of that, all Halberds slower than 5 ticks have their attack rate set to 5 ticks. Now, my big question with this is, does that affect the Crystal Halberd special attack? The way I read it, I assume it does, which in my opinion makes this relic cracked. If you can get your Crystal Halberd spec off every 5 ticks potentially, that's an unbelievable way to get damage off, and it can pair really nicely with a special attacking benefit on top of the Flask of Fervor. Not to mention, if you do have the Crystal Halberd, that means that you have Tyranwin, which means if you take the Evil Eye teleport, you can basically use a Flask of Fervor, use up all your special attack, teleport to Gauntlet, enter it, and reset your Flask, and that way you can really maximize the Crystal Halberd and the special attacks that you can get from it. These next two are both for rangers, and they have similar but inverse effects, funny enough. The first one says that hitting with a bow increases your bow's minimum hit by 1, capping at 15% of your base maximum hit. This bonus is halved when you take damage that you didn't or couldn't pray against. So effectively, if you're not taking damage, you can stack up your minimum hit by up to 15% of your maximum hit. So if your maximum hit is 100, let's say, you would be increasing each hit minimally by 15 damage at this maximum cap. That's very strong. That's very effective. I'm definitely going to put that in the fun and effective tier. It's definitely going to increase your damage up very, very nicely. On the other end, we have the inverse effect, where hitting with the bow increases your bow's maximum hit by 1, capping at 15% of your base maximum hit once again, and it has the same effect where if you take damage that you didn't or couldn't pray against, you will reset your damage cap. I do think this is better than the minimum hit personally. I think maximum hits are usually preferred by most players, but maybe there are some considerations depending on maybe your accuracy, let's say. I'm not sure what people might prefer in that scenario, but in general, I do think people prefer maximum hits, and I'm going to say that that's probably what people will like as well in this option. So I'm going to put it at the top of the fun or the effective tier. It's certainly better, in my opinion, than the minimum hit option. Okay, this one right here is unbelievable. Crossbows hits always max hit. I'm baffled by this one, genuinely. I don't know how they're letting us get away with this, right? Now, sure, you might have that 7-tick crossbow that you're working with, but you're getting a 70% damage boost on top of always hitting your max hit. This is just freaking nuts to me, frankly. I gotta put this at the top of the cracked tier. I wasn't gonna make a ranged build, honestly. I was thinking about going for a melee route primarily, but this alone is making me consider if I want to make another Zerite crossbow build like I did a few years back, just because of how incredible this one sounds. I'm so excited about the potential that this one has. I know it might not objectively be that good for DPS or whatever, but dude, come on, this just looks so much fun. I cannot get over this. This one actually made me feel like a little kid looking at it. And just when you thought it couldn't get better, it gets better. This next pact reads that crossbows attack roll accuracy twice. So sure, you're attacking every 7 ticks with a crossbow, but you're getting a 70% damage boost, max hitting every time that you hit, and you could be getting echo attacks off every single time. So potentially, if you get up to 6 echo hits off, that's upwards of 600 damage like we talked about earlier, and you have a double accuracy chance to roll that. This is crazy. I can't believe they're doing this to crossbows. It's just so freaking good. It does feel like they nerfed the T-bow a little bit just by looking at this. You're not going to have the never miss benefit like you had in the last league, but I think that's fine, and I kind of like that they're giving us more options with crossbows and giving us variety. I think it's a really fun way to approach the league. It's not as one-dimensional, and I think the crossbows are so exciting to use in this league. I think it's going to be very popular this time around. And then there were 2. This next one reads that while any thrown weapon is equipped, increase your ranged accuracy by 60. That's quite nice. I could see this being maybe overkill if you're taking the Drygore Blowpipe, but in the event that you want to pair it up with the melee strength build like we mentioned earlier, this could be like a lot of fun. I'm not sure exactly what the max hit damage is going to look like. I'm going to put it in the fun and effective tier. I like that it offers a way to mix up, go with a melee route and a ranged route. This could be a lot of fun. And the very last pact to talk about, it reads that when attacking a thrown weapon, you can now throw at an additional nearby target. So effectively, you can hit up to 2 targets at once. When it comes to bossing, this probably isn't all that useful, but if you're in multi-fighting Slayer or you're using Chinchampas already, this could be a really cool ricochet effect. I am curious how this will work with Chinchampas. Will it continuously just ricochet across all the targets that you end up hitting? I'm not sure. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun though. I will also put this in the fun and effective tier, and that is going to be a tier list. So yeah, that took a long time to make, but I wanted to get this out today. This is the day that the packs actually dropped. I'll get a screenshot of this tier list to you guys in the description. I know it can be a little hard to read, and in some spots in the video I got a little bit blurry, but hopefully it can give you a little idea of what each pact is about and where they stand right now. Again, this is just literally my opinion. I know for sure I got some things wrong or I'm overlooking some stuff, so do me a favor and tell me what I'm totally wrong about or what you're personally really excited about. What am I underrating? What am I totally overrating? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Again, this stuff literally just came out today, and JMods have already said that some of the info needs tinkering, like some of the percentage chances and things like that, so we'll have to revisit this as we get closer to the league. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you got something out of this video, be sure to drop a like. I put a lot of work into making this video happen, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm going to be putting out a lot more Leagues content. I have some build videos coming out pretty soon, which I'm excited about. And especially once we get all the relics, I'm going to have a lot of discussion about those. And I'm excited to chat about that with you guys as well as we go further. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Take care.